When trust shatters, how far would you go to reveal the truth? After discovering my wife's secret life, I made a decision that would change everything. My name is Andrew Miller, 31 years old, living in Seattle. I work as a financial analyst for a small investment firm, and perhaps the nature of my job has influenced my personality. I'm calm, cautious, and a bit reserved. I enjoy stability and simplicity, feeling content when everything is in order. On weekends, I often spend time reading or walking around the city alone, sometimes sitting for hours at a familiar downtown cafe, watching the world go by. I never thought of myself as someone who would be easily swept up by a relationship until I met Lisa. Lisa Johnson, my wife, is 28 and originally from Portland. She moved to Seattle to work in media, and her personality couldn't be more different from mine. She's energetic, outgoing, and full of life. Lisa has a natural charm that makes people feel at ease, drawing them in effortlessly. She's never one to shy away from trying new things, unlike me. Sometimes, I feel Lisa is like a refreshing breeze, while I'm more like a calm lake. Our differences somehow brought us closer together. We met at a friend gathering about 4 years ago. Lisa is close friends with Rachel, one of my college friends. That night, Lisa showed up with a bright smile and a natural confidence that made her stand out. I was usually the quiet one, just listening, but Lisa was the one keeping the conversation lively, sharing funny travel stories from her recent trip to Europe. That evening, I felt pulled into her world, and for the first time, I found myself wanting to know someone better. Soon after, we started dating, and our relationship quickly blossomed. Those early days were full of color and excitement. Lisa often came up with ideas for our dates, from picnics and food adventures to hikes around Seattle's parks. One time, we planned a picnic at Discovery Park, but the weather turned suddenly, and we got drenched in a downpour. We had no rain gear, both of us soaked from head to toe, but Lisa just laughed and pulled me back to the car. We sat there eating sandwiches, watching the rain together, and talking about everything and anything. To this day, that memory remains one of my favorites with her. After 2 years of dating, I proposed to Lisa at a cozy cafe where we used to meet up often. Our wedding took place on a warm day in July, with family and close friends by our side. That day felt like a dream, watching Lisa walk towards me in her wedding dress, a smile of pure happiness on her face. We exchanged vows, promising to be there for each other through life's ups and downs. The first few months of marriage were wonderful. Being husband and wife brought a new kind of joy we hadn't known before. Every morning, Lisa would wake up early, make coffee, and prepare breakfast, leaving little notes with funny messages that made me smile all day. We spent our weekend evenings cooking together, experimenting with new recipes, or watching movies. She even encouraged me to try things I'd never considered before, like kayaking or photography. Lisa had this way of making the ordinary feel special, and I truly believed we would always be as happy, ready to face any challenges together. But slowly, things began to change when Lisa started getting more involved with her work and became absorbed in the game Valorant. At first, I thought it was just a way for her to unwind after work, but gradually, she began spending most of her free time playing and chatting with friends online. I didn't think much of it at first, as I trusted her completely. Yet, over time, I started feeling a subtle distance growing between us. At first, everything seemed normal. Lisa said she was just playing with an online friend named Rick, simply to unwind after work. I didn't think much of it and didn't want to come across as overly jealous. Lisa was always outgoing, had plenty of friends, and playing games online was just one of her ways to relax. But gradually, I began to notice that Lisa was spending more and more time with Rick. What started as a few games each evening soon became hours of chatting with him every night, even when they weren't playing. They messaged each other, sent pictures, and even videos that she wouldn't let me see. Once, I noticed Lisa laughing happily at a text from Rick, a smile I hadn't seen her give me in quite a while. There were other strange signs, too. Lisa started doing things I'd never seen her do before. After work, she used to cook with me or go for walks together on weekends. But recently, she began saying she had to stay late for work or was meeting friends, people she had never mentioned before. She also began putting on makeup and dressing up, even if she was only sitting at home gaming. Before, she would only dress up for special occasions, but now, even just sitting in front of the computer, she'd carefully choose her outfit and do her makeup. Whenever Rick texted her, Lisa became much more private. She used to leave her phone on the table openly, but now, whenever a message came in, she'd grab her phone and walk out of the room or turn off the screen if I got too close. Sometimes, I'd ask who she was talking to, and she'd just laugh and say it was work stuff or just a friend. Her answers grew vaguer and more evasive each day. One evening at dinner, I noticed Lisa suddenly place her phone face down on the table, seeming tense when a message came in. When I asked her casually about it, she said it was from a colleague. But I noticed that the name on the screen was Rick's. Before I could say anything, she quickly flipped her phone over and changed the subject, leaving me feeling confused and suspicious. I also noticed that Lisa began avoiding physical contact with me. Hugs and gentle gestures started to fade. She used to come home with a smile, asking how my day went, but now she'd rush through the door, barely acknowledging me, and go straight to her room to play games. She would spend the entire evening chatting and laughing with Rick, while I sat outside, waiting for some of her attention that I never received. Occasionally, I'd overhear her giggling, whispering playful or even flirtatious remarks, words I hadn't heard from her in a long time. A feeling of unease grew inside me. She changed the passwords on her phone and computer, something that had never even crossed our minds before. Once, I asked if I could watch a game video she and Rick had recorded, but Lisa flat out refused, saying it was private. Since when did we have secrets like this? I told myself I was probably overreacting, but the odd behavior just kept piling up. Lisa started spending less and less time with me. Weekends, which used to be our special time together, were now often dedicated to her online meetups with Rick. Gradually, our conversations dwindled down to brief questions about each other's day, her answers growing colder and more distant. Despite trying to reassure myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more than friendship between Lisa and Rick. One night, Lisa stayed up late gaming. I went to bed earlier, thinking she'd play for a little while and join me soon, as usual. But the hours dragged on. It was past 1 a.m., then 2 a.m., and I could still hear her laughing and chatting loudly in the other room. I tried to close my eyes and sleep, but the sound of her cheerful conversation and giggling with someone through her headset made it impossible. Feeling uneasy, I got up and walked over to gently remind Lisa to lower her volume a bit. When I stepped into the room, I saw her beaming, her face lit up as she talked to Rick on her screen. I asked her casually, "Who's Rick? He sounds like a fun guy." Lisa just looked at me and laughed, saying, "Oh, he's just a friend, don't worry." She said that, but her excited look and the sparkle in her eyes when she mentioned his name made me feel a pain of something I couldn't ignore. I went back to bed, telling myself I was probably overthinking things. But that night, lying alone in the dark, listening to her chatting with another man, I felt a strange, uncomfortable feeling growing inside me. I used to hear that same laughter, those same playful tones, but they used to be for me, shared in moments we'd created together. Now, that was no longer the case. But it wasn't just a one-time thing. From then on, almost every night, Lisa stayed up late to play games with Rick. I noticed that she'd start waking up later each morning, dark circles forming under her eyes, clearly exhausted, but she didn't seem to care. She no longer seemed interested in coming to bed with me and would instead wait until late at night to turn on her computer, sitting there for hours talking and laughing with Rick. Every night, as her lights stayed on late, I'd lie awake in the dark, trying to ignore the voices and laughter drifting from her room. But the uneasy feeling inside me only grew. Some nights, I'd walk in and ask when she'd be coming to bed, and Lisa would give me a brief, dismissive answer before turning back to her screen. I'd quietly return to bed, weighed down by a heaviness in my chest, wondering when the distance between us had grown so vast. As days passed, I realized that Lisa had almost stopped spending any time with me. Those evenings we'd once spent together, sharing stories about our days, had vanished. Now, all her time was spent living in her online world, with Rick on the other side of the screen. I began to feel like an outsider in my own home, waiting for any small moment of her attention that never came. I kept telling myself I should trust her, but from that night on, I couldn't help but notice more and more. Whenever I heard her laughing or saw her messaging Rick, a sense of unease stirred inside me that was impossible to ignore. There were nights when Lisa would suddenly go quiet, barely speaking to me for the entire evening. She'd sit there, glued to her phone screen, while message notifications kept lighting it up. I could see her typing away, occasionally even chuckling at something she read. Trying to keep things light, I asked, "Who's texting you and making you laugh like that?" Lisa barely looked up and gave a casual smile. "Oh, just a friend. Nothing much." The vague response left me uneasy, but I convinced myself not to overthink it. Gradually, I began to realize that it was Rick she was constantly messaging. Their conversations no longer consisted of short exchanges, they went on all day and often into the night. One evening, I tried to ask more directly, "Lisa, you and Rick have been chatting a lot lately. Are you two really that close?" She seemed a bit irritated but still replied, "We're just talking about the game. Don't worry so much." I nodded, trying to brush off my doubts, but something still didn't feel right. Another night, as I watched her smile down at her phone for what felt like ages, I finally worked up the nerve to ask, "Lisa, can I see your messages with Rick? Just so I don't have to worry." Immediately, her expression changed. Her face hardened, her gaze turning sharp. "You want to read my messages?" "I can't believe you're being this jealous," she snapped, catching me off guard. I tried to keep my voice calm. "I'm not jealous. I just feel like you're spending so much time with Rick lately. If you're just friends, what's the big deal in showing me?" Lisa shook her head, visibly annoyed. "Do you not trust me? Why do you feel the need to control me like this? I don't have to explain everything to you." She got up and left the room, leaving me sitting there alone with a million unanswered questions. We used to be so open with each other, but now even a small question could spark an argument. After that day, Lisa became even more secretive. She changed her phone's password, and every time she messaged Rick, she'd make sure to do it out of my sight. One evening, I walked into the living room unexpectedly, and she quickly locked her phone and placed it face down on the table. That unsettled feeling inside me grew stronger and stronger. One night, I tried once again to probe gently, keeping my tone casual. "Lisa, why have you been so distant lately? We used to be so close. Is something going on?" Lisa sighed, avoiding my eyes. "Can you please stop? I don't have anything to hide from you, but I can't take you constantly doubting me like this." I tried to smile, masking the turmoil inside. "I just miss when we used to talk for hours, sharing everything. Now, seeing you having those conversations with Rick, it hurts a bit." She didn't respond, only looked away, her silence saying more than any words could. From that moment on, my questions only multiplied. After that, Lisa started going out more and more often. Each time, she'd say she was meeting friends or had some work to take care of. At first, I didn't think much of it, since we both had our own lives and relationships outside of the house. But her nights out became more frequent, and every time she came home, she seemed different. One evening, Lisa dressed up more carefully than usual. She picked out a striking red dress, put on makeup, and spritzed a bit of perfume. Surprised, I asked, "Where are you headed tonight, all dressed up?" She just laughed, brushing me off. "Oh, just meeting some old friends. Nothing to worry about." She left without another word, leaving me with an uncomfortable feeling I couldn't quite shake, but I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. Then, on another night, Lisa told me she was going to dinner with some friends and might be back late. I said okay, but by 1 a.m., she still wasn't home. I texted to check in, and after a long delay, she replied, saying they'd decided to go to karaoke. I asked when she'd be back, and Lisa responded briefly, "Really late, just go to bed." I lay there, unable to sleep, waiting for her. It was almost dawn when she finally texted to say she'd be staying over with her friends. When Lisa came home the next morning, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. I gently asked, "Where did you stay last night? Why didn't you let me know earlier?" Lisa shot me a frustrated look and answered coldly, "I told you I was with friends. Do you really need to know every detail?" Over time, her nights out turned into frequent overnight absences. She always had a reason ready whenever I asked. Sometimes it was to see an old colleague, other times she'd say a group of friends wanted a late night together. One evening, I tried asking more specifically, "Who are these friends you've been meeting so often? I haven't heard you mention them before." Lisa avoided eye contact and replied, "You don't need to know every single person I meet. This is just part of my own life." Her vague answers only fueled my suspicions. Another time, I asked, "So who are you meeting tonight?" She sighed in irritation and said, "Can you stop asking? I have nothing to hide from you, but you're suffocating with all the questions." I went from staying silent to feeling anxious and frustrated. Lisa's explanations grew shorter and colder each time, while her attitude toward me became increasingly distant. One night, as she was getting ready to go out, I asked, "Where are you going that needs all this preparation?" Lisa spun around, snapping, "Can you not try to control me like this? Do I need to report every little thing I do to you?" Her cold, angry response left me speechless. Even though I tried to calm myself, convincing myself that maybe I was just overthinking, Lisa's behavior left me more unsettled each day. Every time she left the house, saying she was meeting friends or attending to some work, a heaviness settled in my chest, a feeling that she was drifting further and further away from me. No matter how much trust there used to be between us, I couldn't ignore these signs forever. One evening, Lisa fell asleep on the couch after playing games, her phone still clutched in her hand and the screen softly glowing. I walked over, intending to drape a blanket over her, when her phone buzzed with a new message notification. The sender's name appeared clearly, Rick. Just seeing his name made my chest tighten. I hadn't planned to read Lisa's messages, but the surge of curiosity and unease compelled me to glance at the screen. When I clicked on the notification, a long thread of messages opened up, conversations stretching back over several months. Each line on the screen felt like a punch to the gut, revealing a truth I had refused to believe. They weren't just gaming friends, they'd grown close in ways I'd never imagined. Scrolling through the messages, I realized that Lisa and Rick had begun confiding in each other about their personal lives months ago. The exchanges were filled with intimate conversations, shared jokes, and even complaints Lisa had never voiced to me. She shared her stress from work, her frustrations, and even things she was unhappy about in our relationship. Rick responded with empathetic, sweet words, offering her comfort and validation. Gradually, their messages shifted from friendly to something far more romantic. I discovered that Lisa had started sending impersonal photos about 3 weeks ago. It started with simple selfies from a cafe, but soon turned into more revealing photos in our bedroom, her expression becoming increasingly flirtatious. Rick responded with compliments and flirtatious messages of his own, encouraging her with every reply. The images Lisa sent had grown bolder with each exchange, crossing a line that only we, as husband and wife, should have shared. But the most devastating revelation was learning that they'd met in person multiple times. I scrolled further, stunned to read messages like, "I missed that night we spent together at the hotel, and when can we meet again?" They hadn't just shared online messages and photos, they'd taken this affair into the real world. Every late night Lisa said she was out with friends, every time she didn't come home, suddenly made perfect, heart-wrenching sense. They'd arranged to see each other repeatedly, and she'd lied to me again and again. My heart pounded, my breath became shallow, and my eyes stung as I stared at the screen. The betrayal hit me like a wave, nearly suffocating me. Everything I'd ever trusted in Lisa, the faith I'd placed in her, was shattered beyond repair. The woman I'd loved, trusted, and given my whole heart to had deceived me in the cruelest way. At that moment, my entire world collapsed. memories of her lies, the nights she stayed out, the times she avoided my questions, all that came rushing back in painful clarity. Each word on the screen cut deeper, leaving wounds I wasn't sure could ever heal. I stood there, still holding Lisa's phone, consumed by anger and heartbreak, unsure of what to do next. Instead of confronting Lisa directly, I decided to carry out a plan to understand exactly what was going on. After a few nights of sleeplessness, I created a new account on Valorant, using a completely unfamiliar name with no connection to myself. I started playing, finding ways to join Lisa's games and befriending her under this new identity. After only a few matches, she accepted my friend request and, surprisingly, initiated our first chat. At first, I kept the conversation casual, sticking to topics about the game and other light subjects. But heartbreakingly, Lisa quickly became captivated by this stranger. She seemed eager to talk, asking questions about my interests and then rapidly opening up about her own life. Lisa shared stories about her job, the stresses she was facing, and even hinted at struggles in her personal life. It felt like she saw this as a space to release all her emotions. I felt a wave of pain knowing that she was pouring her heart out to a stranger with no hesitation, while between us, the distance was only growing. As time went on, the conversations turned more personal. Lisa began to flirt, sending messages filled with innuendos like, "Talking to you makes me feel so much happier and I feel like I've known you for a long time." Each word hit me like a knife to the heart. Reading those words from my own life, directed at someone else, was an agonizing experience. Before long, Lisa began sending photos to me as this new friend. At first, they were just simple selfies of her at a cafe or at home, but soon, the photos grew more daring, posing at angles meant to entice, sometimes in casual at-home outfits that felt overly familiar. She added captions like, "How do you think I look?" or "It's been a while since I felt this kind of attention." I felt my heart shatter as I looked at those photos, wondering how the woman I trusted could cross this line so easily. Lisa grew bolder with each conversation. She hinted at wanting more, saying things like, "I feel so comfortable talking to you. It's been so long since I felt this way." It was clear she was seeking attention, craving something she thought she lacked, but instead of turning to me, her own husband, she was pouring herself into someone she believed to be a stranger. Each message, each photo she sent, twisted the knife deeper. It was agonizing to sit there, watching her betrayal unfold on the screen, her words and actions tearing apart everything we had built together. I sat there, overwhelmed by anger and sorrow, wondering how long I could endure the lies and deceit that Lisa had so readily embraced. After a while of texting, Lisa became increasingly open, often sending flirtatious messages that left me, posing as the stranger, feeling nothing but pain as I watched her betrayal unfold. Each conversation seemed to draw Lisa and this stranger closer, and her words began crossing boundaries that were meant only for her husband. One evening, she texted, "You know, every time I talk to you, I feel like I'm coming alive again. You make me laugh and forget all my worries." Trying to keep my distance, I replied, "Really? I'm just a stranger on the internet." Lisa replied quickly, as if wanting to erase any gap between us. "But I feel like you understand me better than anyone else, as if we've known each other forever." Each word felt like a knife in my heart, realizing that my wife was so willing to pour her emotions into someone she thought was a stranger. As time went on, Lisa's messages grew even bolder. One day, she wrote, "Do you ever think there could be something more between us?" I didn't know how to respond, so I cautiously replied, "What do you mean? We're just online friends, aren't we?" Lisa sent back, "But I feel something special with you. It's been so long since I felt this way." My heart ached as I read her words, knowing that she was so ready to give this stranger the affection and closeness that she should have reserved for me. This wasn't just harmless chatting anymore, she was emotionally invested, pushing aside the reality that she was a married woman. On another night, Lisa surprised me with a suggestive message. "If only we could meet somewhere private, a place where no one would find us." I responded, feeling a painful lump in my throat. "Do you really want that?" Lisa replied immediately, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Yes, I do. I think I need a little freedom, a little space to just be myself, and be with you. She even hinted at a hotel on the outskirts of town, a place where they could meet without anyone knowing. Reading those words, I realized I couldn't deceive myself any longer. Lisa was fully prepared to betray me, without a hint of remorse. The woman I had trusted and loved all these years was now a stranger to me, ready to abandon our life together for an illusion. Every word, every sentence in those messages felt like a deep cut. She was ready to give her love, her attention, and even her desire to someone she thought was a stranger, a role I was forced to play. My heart shattered as I accepted the painful truth. I had become an outsider in my own marriage. After seeing enough to confirm the betrayal, I knew I couldn't endure any more. I began gathering all the evidence, every message, every photo, every word of affection she had shared with this stranger. It was agonizing to relive these moments, but I knew I needed to protect myself and prepare for an inevitable separation. Once I had gathered everything, I reached out to a lawyer to start the divorce process. Sitting across from the lawyer, my heart was a storm of emotions, pain, anger, betrayal. Although I knew the path ahead would be difficult, I understood this was the only way to preserve my dignity and free myself from a betrayal that I could never forgive. On the day of the meeting, I pretended to go along with Lisa's plan, agreeing to meet her at an out-of-town hotel, a place she thought would be the perfect secret location for our encounter. Meanwhile, I sent a message to her family, saying I wanted to plan a surprise birthday gathering for Lisa and invited them to join me at the hotel to help celebrate. I told them it was a surprise party and asked everyone to keep it a secret. Inside the hotel room, I arranged everything meticulously. The walls were covered with the photos Lisa had sent Rick, starting from simple, carefree selfies to more daring, suggestive poses, even including intimate pictures meant only for his eyes. Each photo was placed in chronological order, telling a story of how their relationship had grown. Alongside each image were printed screenshots of their affectionate messages, with each sweet word and promise to meet displayed clearly for all to see. Above the bed hung the largest photo of all, a screenshot of a conversation in which Lisa had suggested meeting at this very hotel. Her words were unmistakable, "If only we could meet somewhere no one would find us," followed by Rick's enthusiastic response. The scene in the room was no longer just a collection of evidence, it was a haunting display of her hidden life with another man. On the bed, I placed a large gift box. Inside was the signed divorce agreement, serving as a final, irrevocable end to all that we had once shared. One by one, Lisa's family members arrived. At first, they looked around in surprise, seeing me there without Lisa. Then, as their eyes adjusted to the room, expressions of confusion turned to shock. Her mother's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth as she looked at the images on the wall, photos of her daughter and intimate moments she'd never imagined. Lisa's father stood silently, his face etched with anger and disappointment as he read each affectionate message Lisa had written to a man who wasn't her husband. A murmur of dismay spread through the room as they took in the sweet, romantic messages, the promises, and the undeniable proof of her betrayal. The atmosphere grew thick and suffocating. Each person's face reflected a different reaction, some were furious, others heartbroken, and all looked at Lisa's pictures with eyes that held no sympathy. Finally, Lisa arrived. She walked into the room with a soft smile, expecting a pleasant surprise. But her smile vanished the instant she saw the walls. Her face went from confusion to utter horror as she recognized her own images, the private photos she had sent to Rick, the loving words she'd thought would remain hidden. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Every intimate photo, every word of affection, was now laid bare in front of her family and me. Lisa glanced around the room, her eyes darting from one shocked family member to the next, then back to the photos, before finally landing on me. Her expression was a mixture of shock, panic, and deep shame. She tried to step forward, as if to explain, but I simply pointed silently toward the bed, where the gift box with the signed divorce papers lay waiting. Trembling, she moved toward the box, lifted the lid, and froze when she saw the divorce papers. Her shoulders began to shake, and tears welled up in her eyes as the full weight of what was happening hit her. The room fell into a heavy silence. Her family members gradually stepped back, their faces filled with anger and sorrow. No one spoke, but their expressions said everything. This betrayal was something no one could forgive. In that moment, I felt a bittersweet sense of relief. I knew this was the end, that I was ready to walk away from the pain and betrayal. Lisa stood there, alone in the room, surrounded by the evidence of her deceit. Seeing the cold, disappointed stares from her family, she seemed to understand that everything was beyond repair. Lisa fell to her knees on the floor, her trembling hands clutching my legs, her voice choked and desperate, pleading through her tears. Please, please forgive me. I truly regret it. I was wrong, I know I lost my way. I'll end everything with Rick. I promise I'll change, I'll do whatever you want, just please, don't leave me. I looked down at the woman who once meant the world to me, now seeming so distant, almost unrecognizable. My gaze was cold, devoid of any compassion. Lisa, do you think an apology is enough? Do you think that just promising to change can undo everything? My voice was steady but heavy, each word striking at the last fragile hope she clung to. Do you have any idea what I've been through? I said, fighting to keep calm. At first, I believed you. But then I saw you drifting away, more and more drawn into conversations with this friend you said was just that. I had doubts, but I didn't want to believe you could betray me. Lisa looked at me, terrified, stumbling over her words. I didn't mean to, it's not like you think. I cut her off, my tone unwavering. Do you even know what I did? I created a new game account, befriended you, pretending to be a stranger. You were pulled in so easily, not caring who was on the other side. You shared things with him you'd never told me. You even flirted, sent private photos, suggested meeting somewhere secret, just the two of you. Lisa, don't you see? I was that stranger. Her face went pale, her eyes widening with horror as she grasped the truth. No, it can't be. You did that? How could you? She shook her head in disbelief. I went on, giving her no chance to explain. I gave you a chance to stop, but you didn't hesitate. You chose betrayal, you chose deceit. And now you're begging me for forgiveness? Do you think I can just forget all of this? Lisa broke down, tears streaming down her face. She crumpled to the floor, her hands covering her face as she sobbed, Please. I'm truly sorry. I know I was wrong. Please, just give me one chance, just one chance. Her gaze pleaded with me, searching desperately for any sign of mercy. But I only looked at her, my heart frozen. Lisa, you destroyed everything yourself. Every memory, every ounce of trust we built, you trampled on it all. I gave you the chance to choose differently, but you chose to stab me in the back. You chose Rick, so now face the consequences. Her family stood there, unable to hide their disappointment and anger. Her mother stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears, her voice choked with grief. Lisa, did you really do this? We loved and trusted you. How could you treat your husband, who loved you so much, this way? She said, her voice laden with hurt and disbelief. Her father, his gaze filled with sorrow, simply said, Lisa, you've brought shame on the whole family. He turned away, saying no more. Lisa's friends shook their heads, their eyes heavy with disappointment. One close friend finally spoke up, her voice bitter, Lisa, we always thought you were trustworthy, but you've ruined everything. You've hurt all of us. One by one, they left the room, each without a word. The room grew quiet, leaving Lisa collapsed on the floor, alone and desperate. No one was left to listen to her pleas, and she was forced to face the consequences of her own actions. When everyone had gone, Lisa's despair burst forth. Her cries echoed through the cold, empty room, each sob filled with agonizing regret. Please, don't leave me. Please forgive me. I know I was wrong. But no one was left to listen. Driven to the edge, Lisa stood, losing control, and began tearing at everything around her. She overturned chairs, ripped photos off the walls, shattered anything she could reach, trying to rid herself of the fury and regret. But no matter how much she destroyed, the memories and evidence of her betrayal remained, impossible to erase. In the chaos, Lisa finally collapsed, her eyes full of tears as she realized she had lost everything, her family, her friends, and the husband she once loved. Amidst the silence and wreckage, Lisa was abandoned, left utterly alone, trapped in a sorrow she could never escape. A year after our divorce, Lisa and I had gone down two completely different paths. While I slowly rebuilt my life, finding new goals and meaning, Lisa spiraled into a series of mistakes and became the subject of gossip and scandal. Initially, after our separation, Lisa tried to hide her loneliness and loss by throwing herself into endless parties and social gatherings. She was frequently seen at high-end events, surrounded by people who valued her only for the moment. Friends we had in common told me about these parties, describing their shock and sadness, as the woman they once respected had become someone they barely recognized. This wasn't the composed, kind-hearted Lisa I once knew, this was someone else, lost, restless, and clinging to temporary distractions. Before long, Lisa got involved with a married man, a wealthy businessman known for his extravagant, reckless lifestyle. Mutual friends messaged me, letting me know that she had been openly dating this man, seemingly unafraid of getting caught. She flaunted this connection at high-end restaurants, at upscale hotels, flaunting the luxury gifts he gave her. But these glittering accessories masked an empty, destructive life, and in time, things turned ugly. One day, as Lisa and her lover dined in an upscale restaurant in the city center, the man's wife showed up unexpectedly. After hearing rumors, she decided to confront the affair herself. Seeing her husband with Lisa, she lost all control and attacked Lisa in front of everyone. She pulled Lisa's hair, hit her, and yelled accusations at her, exposing the entire affair. Lisa's desperate pleas were drowned out by the rage of a betrayed wife. Strangers watched the scene, some filming on their phones, and the images quickly spread across social media, turning her humiliation into public gossip. Friends and acquaintances gradually cut ties with her, unwilling to be associated with someone whose name was now synonymous with scandal. Lisa became increasingly isolated, rejected by those she had once been close to. Her family, unable to bear the shame and disappointment, severed ties with her. Her mother, who had always adored her, now felt only grief and embarrassment. Her father, a man respected in his community, declared that he would no longer acknowledge her as his daughter. In front of their entire family, he announced that Lisa's name was never to be mentioned again in their home. Alone and ostracized, Lisa eventually turned to me, the one person she had once cast aside. She began to send me messages, often late at night, apologizing for her past mistakes and asking if we could meet to talk. When I ignored her, she grew more desperate. Her texts became longer, full of self-pity, guilt, and promises to change. She insisted that she had no one else left, that I was the only one who could help her rebuild her life. Sometimes, she would even hint at harming herself if I didn't respond, trying to manipulate my sympathy. At first, I responded politely, refusing her offers to meet but urging her to seek help. Yet her messages only became more insistent. Then, one cold night, she showed up at my door, reeking of alcohol, her face streaked with tears. She stood there with a bottle of wine in one hand, looking pale and fragile, calling my name between choked sobs, begging for forgiveness. I watched her from the window, unmoved, and didn't open the door. She eventually collapsed onto the steps, crying through the night until the early morning light. Only then did she finally leave, stumbling away in defeat. Though Lisa no longer showed up at my house, the messages continued. Each one seemed more sorrowful, more frantic than the last, as though her entire existence depended on me taking her back. She warned that without me, she'd have no reason to go on. But these words no longer affected me, my heart was firmly closed, and her desperation no longer had any power over me. As for myself, after all the painful events, I gradually found peace in my new life. My career in finance gave me focus, structure, and a renewed sense of purpose. Driven by the need for self-improvement, I advanced quickly in my job, taking on new challenges that helped me regain confidence and satisfaction in life. Each workday felt like a fresh chapter, and each challenge was a reminder that I was capable of resilience. Beyond my career, I began investing in myself and rediscovering old interests. I took up photography and explored my city with a camera, capturing simple, serene moments I had once taken for granted. I even found joy in hiking, spending weekends alone on trails or in the mountains, finding solace and inspiration in nature. Each trip offered a sense of freedom and release I hadn't known before. During one of these weekend hikes, I met Emily, a passionate freelance photographer. Her independent spirit and open-mindedness were unlike anyone I had ever met. She had a refreshing optimism that encouraged me to embrace life's beauty again. We began sharing more about ourselves, from personal experiences to dreams for the future. Life for me had found a new light and color, no longer chained to the past. My memories of Lisa became a distant echo, a reminder of what I had overcome. Now, I understood that happiness was not about material things or fleeting excitement, but about finding peace in the present moment. I set new goals for myself, pursuing the kind of life I had once only dreamed about. I knew, with certainty, that I was ready to embrace the future. As for Lisa, after all her desperate attempts to reconnect, she finally disappeared from my life. She had lost everything, her family, her friends, and our marriage. Those who once knew her now used her as a cautionary tale, a warning of the dangers of betrayal. Meanwhile, I moved forward, ready to live a life of contentment, freedom, and quiet strength. Each day, I felt more certain that I had escaped a dark chapter and was stepping into the life I was meant to live.